Hey everyone, hope you're having a great day. Diep's pen hovered over the signature line. The contract looked clean and harmless, but she could feel the trap inside it. One signature, and Vi wouldn't need to block gates or pressure farmers anymore. She could just wait for Diep to slip and then squeeze her with legal teeth. Diep put the pen down. "I'm not signing," she said. James stood across the table, drained and tense. "You're sure?" "If I sign, she owns my next mistake," Diep replied. "Nemu. And she'll make sure I have one." In the living room, Nye was quiet, hurt quiet. Diep glanced at her and felt the guilt twist. "Con, Mom and Dad messed up," Diep said softly. "We promised and we didn't show up. We can't undo that, but we can change what happens next." Nye didn't answer. She hugged her pillow tighter, eyes down. That night, after Nye fell asleep, Diep sat on the floor with a notebook full of messy arrows. Vi's plan was clear. Exclusive deals, short-term high prices, pressure at the village gate, anything to keep Diep reactive and desperate. So, Diep wrote one sentence at the top of the page. Stop chasing. Start designing. If Diep kept fighting on Vi's battlefield, she'd lose. So she decided to build her own. The next morning, she went back to the village. Not to beg, not to argue, but to organize. With Chutu's help, she gathered the farmers who still trusted her, plus a few who were undecided. No big speeches, just tea, chairs, and honesty. "I can't promise the highest price," Diep told them. "Vi can overpay right now because she wants control. But I can promise consistency, and I can promise we build this as a group." "Group how?" someone asked. "We pool supply and follow one standard," Diep said. "One schedule, one quality rule, one packing routine. Less chaos, less waste, more stability. Small, but solid." A woman crossed her arms. "And if Vi comes again with another offer?" Diep nodded. "She will. I'm not asking anyone to break a contract. If you already signed, I respect that. But if you haven't, don't decide in fear. Decide with your eyes open." She kept it simple. Clear sorting, consistent packing, and a basic cold chain routine so freshness wouldn't depend on luck. Then she did something new. She wrote it down. A checklist everyone could follow, taped to a wall near the packing area. "No more relying on memory," she said. We rely on process." They even set up a small hub at Chutu's place. Nothing fancy, just shaded space, clean mats, and a place to pre-cool and pack the same way every time. It made the work feel calmer, like they were finally steering instead of reacting. Chutu nodded, and that nod carried weight. Meanwhile, James was changing too. After the school event, he couldn't shake the image of Nee scanning the crowd, trying not to cry. He also couldn't forget that message. "Mom, I don't like you being busy anymore." For the first time, he understood that "I'm sorry" wasn't enough if nothing changed. So he went to work and drew a boundary. He asked to hand off one project. He pushed back on meetings that didn't matter. And when his boss pressed, James said calmly, "I'll deliver better work with a stable schedule, and I need to be present at home." It wasn't easy, but he didn't fold. That evening, he came home, looked Diep in the eye, and said, "I'm in, for real. Tell me what we're building." Diep stared like she didn't trust her ears. James continued, "We build a stable delivery route. Same pickup windows, same drop-off timing, no gambling on every run. And we put family on the calendar like it's non-negotiable." He pulled out his phone and literally blocked time. School pickup, dinner, weekend morning with Nye. It wasn't romantic, but it was love in a language Diep could finally believe. Diep felt relief. Not because the danger was gone, but because she wasn't carrying it alone anymore. They rebuilt from the ground up. James found better insulated containers and sturdier crates. He helped Diep mark loading order so cold air wouldn't get trapped wrong. Diep simplified the product list. Less variety, more control. They chose smaller volume on purpose, focusing on buyers who cared about quality and consistency. A week later, the new system faced its first test. The load was modest, but the stakes were massive. Farmers followed the checklist. Produce was cooled properly before packing. Diep labeled every crate by batch so they could trace problems instead of guessing. Before leaving, Diep went into Nye's room. Nye was awake, doing homework, eyes guarded. Diep sat beside her. "Con, Mom and Dad have to deliver today, but tonight we eat together. No phones. And tomorrow, Dad picks you up from school." James appeared at the door. "Promise," he added. Nye studied him, testing the word. Then she nodded once, still not smiling, but not shutting down either. At the market, Diep's stomach churned. First runs always reveal cracks, and Vi would be watching for them. But when they unloaded, the difference showed immediately. James moved steady and careful. Diep opened the first crate. Crisp, clean, alive. The vendor, someone who had doubted her before, checked the produce and nodded. "This is what I remember." Diep exhaled. "So you'll take it?" "I'll take it," the vendor said. "Keep it like this, and I'll order more next week." That's how trust returns. One quiet yes at a time. Within the hour, Diep's phone started buzzing. Repeat orders. New requests. People asking for the same standard, the same freshness. Across the aisle, Vi showed up, smooth smile, sharp eyes, trying to slip into the conversation with buyers like she belonged there. But the vendor barely glanced at her and said, "If you can match this quality consistently, we'll talk. If not, don't waste my time." Vi's smile tightened. She walked away without a scene, but Diep felt the message. Vi had noticed the shift, and she didn't like it. On the drive home, the sky was warm, with late afternoon light. The car was quiet in a good way, like two people finally breathing together. As they turned onto their street, Diep noticed the house lights were on and the curtains were drawn, like someone had prepared something. James glanced at her. "Just, follow my lead when we go inside." Diep was about to ask what he meant when her phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. A message popped up. "Hi, is this Diep? I got your contact from the market. I have a proposal that could scale your operation. Are you available to talk tonight?" Diep stared at the screen, heart thumping. Her first instinct was to reply immediately. "Yes, of course. Tell me everything." But she stopped. She looked at James, then at the glowing window of their home, and reminded herself, not everything has to be answered first. A bigger opportunity had found her, and Diep knew bigger doors never open without bringing bigger pressure with them. Diep stepped inside and froze. The living room looked different, not expensive, not fancy, just warm. The floor was cleared. A soft blanket was spread out like a picnic. There were snacks arranged in little bowls. A small paper sign leaned against the couch, hand-drawn in marker. Family night. Nyi stood nearby, wearing her pajamas, looking confused but curious. She glanced at Diep, then at James, like she didn't want to hope too hard. James set his keys down and crouched to Nye's level. "Okay, kiddo. I owe you something. Actually, we both do." Nye didn't speak. She waited. James nodded toward the blanket. "Tonight is your night. No work, no phones, no just one call. We watch your favorite movie, we eat snacks, and we do that thing you like where you pick the funniest scene and replay it 5 times. Nyi's lips twitched, almost a smile. "I only replay it 3 times. James put a hand to his chest like he'd been corrected in court. "My mistake. 3 times. Maximum." Diep felt something in her throat tighten. It wasn't sadness this time. It was the strange feeling of being cared for when you've been in survival mode for too long. She glanced at the kitchen and saw the real shock. James had cooked, not perfectly, but clearly with effort. There was a simple soup on the stove, a plate of sliced fruit, and rice, already warm. Ly looked at the food like it might disappear. Dad made this? James nodded. I watched 2 videos. I almost burned the pot, but I won. Diep laughed, quietly, like she was afraid the sound would break the moment. Ly finally smiled, small but real. And when she sat down on the blanket, Diep noticed she left space on both sides, as if inviting them in. They sat. James put his phone face down on the shelf, far away. Diep did the same. For a second, both of them stared at their phones like quitting an addiction. Then, Ly pointed at the TV. Movie, James saluted. Movie. They started the film, and at first, Ly watched cautiously, like she was waiting for a buzz or a ring to steal her parents away. But when nothing happened, when Diep didn't reach for her phone, when James didn't glance at his notifications, Ly's shoulders slowly lowered. Halfway through, she leaned into Diep, and Diep almost cried right there. James saw it too. He didn't say anything, but he shifted closer until the 3 of them were pressed together on the blanket, like a small fortress against everything outside. Later, when the movie ended, Ly sat up and looked at them seriously. Are you still mad? She asked. Diep blinked. Mad? At each other, Ly said. You were loud last night. James's face softened. No, sweetheart. Not mad. Just stressed, but we're fixing it. Diep nodded. We're learning, and we're sorry we hurt you. Ly hugged her pillow, thinking, I don't like when you're busy. Diep's heart squeezed. I know. James took a slow breath. Can I tell you something, Ly? Being busy isn't the goal. It never was. Sometimes we forget that. But you are the goal. Ly stared at him like she was checking if his words matched his eyes. James continued, so we're making new rules. Family comes first. And when we can't be there for something, we tell you early, not last minute. No broken promises. Ly's voice was quiet. So, you'll come next time? Diep reached for her hand. Yes, James added, and you can hold us accountable. If we slip, you tell us. Ly frowned. I will. James smiled. Good, please do. For the first time since the school event, the heaviness in the house lifted. It didn't disappear completely. Life doesn't work like that. But it moved, like a storm that finally starts drifting away. Later, when Ly went to bed, James and Diep stayed on the couch in the dim light. The silence between them wasn't tense anymore. It was tired, but safe. Diep whispered, Thank you. James looked at her. For what? For choosing us, she said. Not just saying it. James swallowed, eyes glossy. I didn't realize how far I drifted until I saw her face on that stage. Diep nodded slowly. And I didn't realize how much I was asking you to carry, while I acted like I was the only one carrying anything. They both sat with that truth. No blame. Just honesty. Then, without a big dramatic moment, James reached out and took Diep's hand. Diep squeezed back. No speeches. No. I promise, shouted into the room. Just hands locked together like a quiet agreement. Same team. But outside their little bubble, the world didn't pause. Diep's phone was still sitting on the shelf. That earlier message about scaling her operation still existed. The opportunity didn't vanish just because she chose a family night. And when Diep finally picked up her phone after Ly fell asleep, she saw there were more messages now. Not just one. The same unfamiliar number followed up. I can offer a consistent weekly contract. Higher volume, stable payment. We're expanding distribution and looking for a reliable supplier. Then another text from someone else. Hi, Diep. Heard your produce. Quality is strong. Are you open to B2B supply for a chain of small stores? Diep stared, pulse rising. This was what she wanted, wasn't it? Bigger buyers, bigger stability, bigger reach. But bigger buyers mean bigger demands, more volume, tighter timelines, more risk. James saw her expression. What is it? Diep handed him the phone. It's a door opening. James read the messages, then looked up slowly. This could change everything. Diep nodded, excitement and fear twisting together. Or it could break everything if we rush. James leaned back, thinking like he does when he's trying to solve a system instead of a single problem. Okay, we don't jump. We evaluate. We set terms. Diep exhaled. We'll need more growers. Not necessarily, James said. We might need to tighten the model. First, if we scale without control, we'll repeat the first disaster. Diep looked at him surprised. A month ago, he would have said, let's take the deal. We'll figure it out. But now he sounded like a partner who had learned the cost of chaos. James continued, if we take a bigger contract, Vi will react. She'll double down. She'll try to break the farmers, break the logistics, break the buyer's trust. She'll hit wherever we're weakest. Diep nodded, eyes narrowing. So we strengthen the weak points. James tapped the checklist Diep had made earlier, now folded, smudged, and loved like a tool that actually works. Process, standards, cold chain, consistent route. Diep smiled faintly. You sound like me. James returned a small grin. Maybe I'm learning. Diep's thumb hovered over the reply button. Her brain wanted to answer immediately, but her heart told her to be strategic. She typed carefully, "Thanks for reaching out. I'm available to discuss. Before we talk volume, I'd like to understand quality specs, delivery schedule, and payment terms." She hit send. Then she set the phone down again and looked at James. If we do this, life gets harder. James didn't flinch. Then we get smarter. Diep's eyes softened. And Nye? James nodded toward the hallway where their daughter's door was closed, the house finally quiet. We protect her. We don't let growth steal her again. Diep felt tears prick again, but she blinked them away. Okay. They sat there for a while, hand in hand, listening to the hum of the fridge, the distant sound of a motorbike passing outside. It was a normal night, except it wasn't. It was the night they stopped being two people dragging a dream and became a unit. And somewhere else, in a room with better lighting and sharper edges, Vi was probably hearing the same whispers. Diep's quality is back. Diep is organizing. Buyers are returning. Vi wasn't losing because Diep got lucky. Vi was losing because Diep stopped playing defense. But Vi wouldn't accept that quietly. Not her. So, while Diep and James sat in peace for the first time in a long time, the next level of the game was already moving toward them. Bigger contracts, bigger expectations, bigger targets on their backs. The camera lingers on their hands, interlocked on the couch. Then it cuts to Diep's phone screen lighting up with a new message. Let's talk tomorrow. If you can handle volume, this is a serious opportunity. Diep looks at James. James looks back. No fear, no running, just that same silent agreement. Same team. And as the screen fades to black, you can feel it coming. Because every time Diep climbs higher, the pressure doesn't just rise. It transforms. And the next storm? It won't be about one shipment. It'll be about whether Diep can scale her trust without losing her soul. Diep refuses to sign Vi's trap contract and decides to stop playing by Vi's rules. Instead, she rebuilds her business from the ground up by organizing farmers into a group supply system, standardizing packing and cold storage routines, and focusing on smaller but consistent deliveries to protect quality and reputation. James reaches a turning point after the school event. actively prioritizing family and supporting Diep with stable logistics and stricter delivery routes, making her feel less alone for the first time. Their new system succeeds. The produce arrives at the market crisp and fresh. Buyers reorder quickly, and Vi struggles to interfere because Diep's trust is now real and visible. The emotional peak comes when James quietly makes family night to comfort Nye, bringing back her smile and restoring peace at home. But just as they reconnect, new messages arrive, bigger buyers and a scaling opportunity, hinting at a higher level of pressure ahead.